At 22:17 local time, the mountain ridge lit up like a second sunrise. Not dawn, not lightning. An AGM-88 Harm had just slammed into the antenna of an Iranian S-300 battery that was never supposed to be alive. 16 Israeli F-35 Ayadirs were crossing the western approach at roughly 37,800 feet, carrying a loadout that changed everything. 4 Spice 1000 bombs on the outside. 2 GBU-31 JDAMs packed inside. More firepower, less invisibility. For 9 days, air defenses had been torn apart piece by piece. 30 fuel targets were already marked. The route home looked clean, simple, finished. It wasn't, because one radar hidden nearly 50 kilometers deeper in the mountains had stayed cold long enough to survive. And the second it woke up, the whole mission changed. Fuel margins shrank, threat rings came alive, and one wrong move could turn a precision strike into a catastrophe. If you enjoy high-tension military breakdowns told second by second, subscribe to the channel, because this is where the night really begins. At 22:17 local time, a white flash ripped across the western ridgeline of Iran. Not sunrise, not weather. An AGM-88 Harm had just crossed the last seconds of its flight and smashed into the antenna array of an S-300 battery that was supposed to be dead. 16 Israeli F-35 Ayadirs were already east of the Zagros, holding roughly 37,900 feet, moving at close to 0.82 Mach on what should have been the cleanest return leg of the operation. 9 nights of strikes had already peeled away layer after layer of Iranian air defense. More than 30 petroleum and support targets had been cued, hit, or re-hit. The math said the dangerous part was over. The math was wrong. What Israeli planners had destroyed days earlier was a decoy. Good silhouette on satellite pass. Convincing thermal bleed. Enough wreckage to sell the story. But the real S-300 had been hauled nearly 48 kilometers deeper into the mountains, parked cold, engine silent, radar dark, waiting for something worth exposing itself for. Now it had that chance. Each Adir was flying heavy. 4 Spice 1000s on the outer stations. 2 GBU-31 JDAMs buried inside. In Israeli terms, beast mode. More steel, more reach, more punishment. But every pylon, every rack, every external contour added shape to the radar picture. The aircraft designed to look like a marble on scope had grown into something much easier to notice. The S-300 crew had maybe 85 seconds to live after radiating. That was the gamble. Transmit, track, fire, survive if luck allowed it. Luck ran out first. A US Navy EA-18G Growler orbiting farther west caught the emission almost instantly, triangulated the source, and pushed coordinates through Link 16. Another Growler, about 62 miles south, answered with a Harm already accelerating past Mach 2. For a few seconds, the entire mission narrowed to one question. Would the missile hit the radar first? Or would the radar lock the jets first? The Harm got there first. It hit the S-300's antenna at just over Mach 2, tearing the radar face apart in a burst of fire bright enough to wash the ridge in white and orange. A battery worth well over $100 million disappeared in one violent flash. The crew never made the jump from search to fire control. They never got the shot, but the light faded fast. And the problem did not, because one hidden S-300 had already proved something far worse than a launch ever could. Iran still had pieces on the board that everyone thought were gone. Degraded was not destroyed. Crippled was not erased. And if one battery had survived by sitting cold nearly 50 kilometers inside the mountains, then the real question was no longer whether more surprises existed. It was how many. That thought stayed in the cockpit while the Adirs pushed on toward Tehran. And there was another number pressing on every pilot even harder. Roughly 1,780 kilometers from Nevatim to the target area. Roughly the same distance. Back. On older missions, that kind of route leaned on KC-707 tankers orbiting in predictable lanes. But tanker tracks had become too easy to read, too easy to watch. Tonight, the F-35Is were flying with external drop tanks instead. That bought reach, not comfort. Think of it like crossing a desert with the fuel needle already flirting with empty. Every correction costs you. Every detour steals from the return trip. Every evasive turn burns minutes you do not own. And those minutes were already disappearing. About 13 kilometers from the Chevron storage complex in northwestern Tehran, Ruby Flight caught the second threat diamond of the night. This one was closer, lower, nastier. A Pantsir S1 hidden inside the depot perimeter, tucked between steel tanks and service lanes where satellite angles had failed to expose it. 20-kilometer missile envelope. Twin 30mm cannons inside 4 kilometers. Radar-guided, fast, brutal. Ruby Lead was already descending through 16,200 feet for the bomb. Run! Stable enough to release, exposed enough to die, and what happened in the next few seconds would set the entire night on fire. Tank 3 went first. Not a fire, not a flare-up. A full pressure-fed detonation that punched through the steel shell, atomized tens of millions of liters of fuel into vapor, and turned the center of the depot into a rising wall of orange light. Ruby Lead had held the jet steady for just long enough. The Spice 1000 dropped clean off the pylon, unfolded its wings, and started its glide with no rocket plume, no dramatic exhaust, nothing but silent geometry and guidance. GPS carried it toward the neighborhood. In the last seconds, the electro-optical seeker compared the ground below to the reference image loaded before takeoff. Shape against shape, edge against edge, like facial recognition for steel tanks. Then impact. The warhead punched in and detonated roughly 2 feet above the fuel surface. That detail mattered. Too low and the blast stayed trapped. Too high and the energy scattered. This was almost perfect. Around 29 million liters of gasoline flashed into a vapor cloud and ignited. Before the fragments had finished spreading, the fireball climbed nearly 290 meters in under 3 seconds. Black smoke rolled upward. Shockwaves kicked dust and loose sheet metal across the service roads. Ruby Lead broke hard right the instant the call came. Weapon away, brake, flares out. The G-suit locked around his legs as the Adir tore off the release line. The Pantsir's missile warning tone shrieked in his helmet a fraction later. One missile off the rail, tracking, closing. The ASQ-239 hit back immediately, flooding the seeker with electronic noise so dense the missile's picture started to bend. For about 3 seconds, everything narrowed to a single sound in the cockpit. Tone, warble, tone again, then nothing. The missile corkscrewed wide into the dark behind the formation, but the Pantsir was still alive, still radiating, still sitting between 11 massive fuel tanks that had not finished cooking. Then Tank 6 ruptured, diesel this time, hotter burn, longer column. Tank 8 followed less than 2 seconds later, the sidewall peeling apart as the heat wave crossed the yard. 3 separate fires merged into one moving inferno. The light was so violent it threw shadows across apartment blocks almost a kilometer away. Windows flashed, rooftops glowed. The whole northern edge of Tehran looked like it had been opened with a torch. The Adir escort arrived roughly 55 seconds later. The pilot had watched the whole thing unfold through DAS, the distributed aperture system reading heat and motion through the smoke. The Pantsir's radar was still sweeping, still hunting for the egress path. One more Spice 1000 came off the rail, glided low, and drove straight through the chassis. The radar cut to black in mid-sweep. That should have ended the danger. Instead, it created the next one, because the first wave had not only destroyed the depot, it had built something in the sky above it. A petroleum smoke column more than 5,000 feet high, thickening by the second, drifting it east with the wind directly into the approach lanes of every aircraft still coming in. The target was burning, the air was closing, and the next wave was about to fly into its own success. Sapphire Flight hit the wall 11 miles east of Agdasia. Not a missile, not a fighter. A moving curtain of superheated petroleum smoke, spreading across the Tehran basin exactly where the next attack lane needed to be. Its base still glowed orange from the depot fires behind it. Its upper layers were already climbing past 5,200 feet, widening, thickening, folding over themselves in the prevailing wind. The first wave had done its job too well. It had destroyed the fuel site, and in doing so, it had built a barrier for everyone behind it. JDAMs did not care about smoke. People did. A GBU-31 could still ride GPS toward the programmed coordinates, but the final human check was the problem. The moment when a pilot or weapons officer looks through the targeting pod, confirms the tank farm is the tank farm and not the neighborhood a few hundred meters away, and commits. Through this haze, that step was starting to disappear. Sapphire 1 slid 14 degrees south looking for a gap. 45 seconds burned away, then another 20. Fuel he did not have. The pod slewed through amber blur, heat shimmer, and black veils of soot. Then finally, for less than 3 seconds, the hard line of a storage tank roof cut through the smoke. Crosshairs settled. Coordinates matched. Release. Clean separation. JDAM away. The tail kit corrected 10 times per second as the bomb passed into clearer air beyond the smoke wall. It struck true. Steel roof folding back like a can lid before the fuel underneath ignited and rolled upward. Then the second failure arrived. A mobile GPS jammer came alive somewhere inside the basin, truck-mounted, moving, hard to pin down. Noise flooded the L1 and L2 bands, the same frequencies every GBU-31 in the package relied on. The fixed jammers had been hit days earlier. The mobile ones were different. They lived by moving every few hours, hiding in a city of nearly 10 million people. Now both guidance paths were degrading at once. JDAMs were taking corrupted satellite data. Spice 1000 still had electro-optical backup, but the smoke was blinding that channel too. Think about the math. A 2,000-pound weapon reporting normal guidance while drifting 150 or 200 meters off a false coordinate. Still stable, still descending, still deadly, just no longer aimed at the place it was supposed to find. 60 kilometers west, an F-15 IWSO switched his APG-82 AESA radar into ground mapping mode and painted through the haze. Radar returns against target coordinates, numbers against shapes. One depot edge appeared almost 5 meters west of where GPS insisted it should be. He ran it again, same offset, same drift. That was enough. He built corrected aim points on the fly and pushed them across Link 16 to the rest of the package. Not perfect, not textbook, but better than trusting a poison signal through a sky that was already on fire. And while the formation fought smoke, heat, and false coordinates, something else was already moving in the dark, south of Tehran. A single MiG-29 lifted off from a dispersed strip south of Tehran while the depot fires were still climbing. No radar, no warning tone, no electronic noise at all. It came up dark, fast, and low, using the city's thermal chaos as cover. Every eye in the strike package was fixed on smoke columns, corrected coordinates, fuel numbers, and burning target boxes. That was the opening. In the middle of all that noise, the simplest move on the board was the one nobody expected. The Fulcrum pilot did not need to broadcast. His infrared search and track was enough. A passive sensor reading heat instead of emitting it. South of the fires, it found a thermal contact at roughly 16 kilometers. An F-16 Barak descending through 17,600 feet toward the southern approach. Engines hot. Attention divided. Radar warning receiver silent because there was not. The distance started collapsing. 12 kilometers. 10 of that was already inside the dangerous part of the envelope for an R-73, a missile built for quick kills at close range. Fast off the rail. Hard to shake once it had a clean picture. The Barak pilot still had no R, then an Adir coming off the norther. The F-35's DAS, 6 infrared cameras stitched into one continuous sphere of vision, flagged a moving heat source against the city's burning background that did not belong to any friendly track. The Adir pilot snapped the contact, rolled the nose, and painted the MiG with fire control radar for more than 28 kilometers. The FNF-35 no. But that was the point. The MiG had gotten close enough to matter. Iran's Air Force had been treated like a problem already solved. It was not solved. It was damaged, delayed, forced down, but not gone. And in a night built on surviving margins, that diffed the hardest T-Shari Ray. A Refin Emerald lead, an F-15I Ram, lined up on the northern storage perimeter with fuel already below bingo by about 4 minutes. One pass left, no second correction, no comfortable re-attack. The WSO worked from a picture stitched together out of APG-82 radar mapping, Link 16 updates, and coordinates corrected in mid-mission through smoke and GPS drift. It was enough. One GBU-31 JDAM came off clean and dropped through a sky still boiling from the earlier fires. Then a second. 2 impacts landed inside the storage zone, bracketing the refinery core without touching it. The gap was roughly 120 meters, wide on paper, razor thin in a night like this. The package was still airborne, the targets were still burning, and the mission was now entering the most dangerous part of all. The strike package made it out. That is the clean version, the simple version, the version people say when they only look at the map after the smoke clears. But that is not what this night was. This was not a smooth mission. It was not a perfectly controlled chain of precision hits. It was a sequence of shrinking margins, one hidden S-300, one Pantsir S, one parked in the right blind spot, one mobile GPS jammer rolling through a city of nearly 10 million people, one MiG-29 rising out of the dark at exactly the wrong time. None of those pieces won the battle on their own. But each one was enough to bend the plan, steal fuel, add doubt, and force decisions under pressure. That, to me, is the real lesson here. Modern air power looks surgical from a distance. Clean lines, smart weapons, perfect overlays. But the closer you get, the uglier the math becomes. A radar survives by staying cold for 9 days. A smoke column climbs 5,000 feet and suddenly blocks an entire approach lane. A GPS drive of 5 meters stops being academic when homes, roads, and industrial targets are packed side by side. A fighter that never turns on its radar can still get within 8 kilometers of a kill. That is how operations change, not with one giant failure, with several small survivals. Personally, I do not think the most dangerous thing that night was the biggest explosion or the brightest fireball. It was the fact that Iran still had systems able to function in fragments, not fully intact, not fully coordinated, but alive enough to interfere, alive enough to punish assumptions, and in a mission running on thin fuel, overloaded data links, and split-second timing, that was more than enough. So the question is not whether the strike hit hard. It did. The real question is what mattered most in changing the shape of the night. The hidden S-300, the Pantsir S-1 inside the depot, the mobile GPS jammer, or the MiG-29 that almost closed unseen. Which one do you think was the most dangerous part of the entire operation? And if you were planning this mission, which threat would worry you the most?